And we're back for another very, very fun, I hope, very exciting, certainly long awaited in some corners of the internet, episode of Certified Forgotten, the podcast where we talk about the movies that have been forgotten. Maybe some of them should stay forgotten. Maybe this one should stay forgotten. We'll get into it. I am Matthew Monagle. I'm one half of your hosts. With me, as always, is my buddy Matt Donato. Say hello, Matt Donato.
Demon Wind.
No, we're not there yet. We're not there
sorry.
yet. We have to do a normal build-up.
Hi, I'm Matt Donato, and I like Demon Wind.
We also have, we couldn't just bring anybody on to talk about Demon Wind. That's not just something you do. You don't just invite a person on to talk about Demon Wind. So Matt handpicked someone especially for this, and now he's going to introduce our poor, unfortunate soul.
Yes, not only did I handpick this poor, unfortunate soul, but I made this poor, unfortunate soul watch Demon Wind last night. So we're coming fresh off the cuff of a Demon Wind watch here. And with us on this episode, we have Miss Alisha Grauso, the editor-in-chief, I guess managing editor of Adam Insider.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my Demon Wind cherry was popped last night, and that is a really apt phrase to describe it, I feel like.
And I still have a job.
Well, we'll see.
I mean, if you got fired, you brought that on yourself. I can't feel too bad about you there, bud. But before we talk about Demon Wind, which is technically a film, just a reminder what the format for this podcast is. The idea behind Certified Forgotten is that there are some films that just did not get as much of a buzz when they came out, and like it or not, Rotten Tomatoes plays an important role in kind of the canon building and gatekeeping of what movies, and particularly what horror films, stay part of the cultural conversation. So we're in the business of finding ones that have 5 or fewer reviews, stuff that did not maybe leave a mark when it came out. And sometimes we're going to open it up. We won't do it all the time, but sometimes we'll open it up to films that predate the Rotten Tomatoes as a platform and haven't necessarily gotten part of the, rediscovered and gotten a lot of contemporary reviews. Demon Wind certainly qualifies for that. It's a movie that came out in 1990, not something that was around when Rotten Tomatoes was around, but it's one that more people are going to go back and publish reviews about, I think. But I want to start kind of with talking to Alisha, our guest, about her history with horror films. So let's start kind of at the very beginning. I know that you're not specifically, Alisha, a horror film person, but I know that's a big part of what you watch and what you talk about and what you review and have other people review too. So how did that begin? What were like the first horror films for you that you stumbled across that were like, oh, this is a genre that I actually like?
Yeah, you're right. I have traditionally, in my career in entertainment journalism and film criticism, I haven't really been known for horror, you're right. More for kind of geek culture, comic book, superhero movies, sci-fi, that kind of stuff. Just by virtue of the fact that I like it, but also my first and previous outlet lean more heavily into that. But horror actually was a really big part of my life. I remember being way too young, and I would watch USA Network used to have this show called Saturday Nightmares that was like a slate of just truly terrible, like campy, like direct to VHS horror movies. And I watched that with my dad every Saturday night, and like clockwork, I would have nightmares for the next 2 nights, and then the whole week my mom would be like, you're not allowed to watch this, you get scared, you're too young. And then the whole week would be me trying to convince my mom to let me watch it again. And then finally her and my dad relenting like on Saturday afternoon. And so the cycle would start all over again. But yeah, like I grew up, I loved getting horror movies at, the nearest video store when those still existed. Like I think I watched Child's Play 3 when I was like in 3rd grade. Same for movies like Dr. Giggles. I remember watching like Hellraiser. I grew up with the original miniseries of the 2-parter for It. And I read Stephen King and everything, R.L. Stein, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, anything scary. I basically read it, watched it, and grew up with it. So I have a pretty solid background in horror, but just got away from it in the last few years.
Yeah, I feel like it's our job to sort of bring you back into it then. So I'm glad we can offer this service.
We'll get to that with Demon Wind.
Demon
Is
Wind.
it a service? Is it a service?
I sort of feel like all we can expect from Matt is every 5 minutes he'll just pop up and go, Demon Wind. That'll be his contribution to this episode.
Windy and go like, Demon
That literally never happened. Never happened.
We'll get to that because Matt has the same problem.
All right, fine. So, kind of along those lines too, you were talking about some of the films that you did discover that fall within the horror genre. I'm kind of curious too about these days, like where you discover, because you do travel. I know for film festivals, you cover a lot of different type of stuff. But like, what's your pipeline? Like, is it just Matt basically
It's Matt,
DMing you
basically.
until you give up and you're like, fine, I'll watch the fucking movie?
It's basically him just sending me like just trailers or just like all caps messages from some obscure horror movie that's coming out. Or, but no, he actually does a column for me for Adam Tickets, for Adam Insider. That's Donato's Dungeon, and it's a roundup of horror news every single week. And so I actually learn about a lot of upcoming things being filmed. Like there was the one we just talked about, the Too Late with Fred Armisen, that my girlfriend's script supervisor on it, and she was like, oh, I'm doing this thing, and I was like, wait, what is the name of that? And she's like, Too Late. I was like, oh my god, yeah, I just read about that yesterday thanks to Matt. So
yeah, and my trailers get pretty comprehensive. Like, did you know there is no less than 3 different clown-based movies coming out this summer?
yeah, you do that a lot.
Clown Hotel, Clown Doll, Clown... What was the other clown one? I forget. But yeah, it's crazy how much fucking shitty horror there is.
So
yeah,
before
and you cover all of it, which means that I by
nature, you have to
I
edit all of
vicariously
it.
have to edit all of it.
Well, let's talk about BD before Donato. Then, like, where would you go to discover stuff? Like, what was your pipeline for the types of movies that are now like, oh, you know, they're early 2000s classics and stuff. Like, where were you hearing about stuff before you had writers that were writing about it?
Oh man, definitely. I still had kind of like a finger on the pulse of it, but it was honestly mostly the big releases. So that's kind of where I really fell off, was that I was still going to the movies for like the wide releases and well, horror isn't really ever big budget, but you know what I mean. But like the smaller stuff, the indie stuff, the festival stuff, I really have kind of a blank spot where I didn't watch much of that. Also because then when I went to grad school, I just didn't have, like, my life was nothing but studying and literature and all the time. So movies for a span of a few years kind of, I wouldn't say fell off my radar, but I really only saw like the biggest things that were released in theaters through those years.
Donato, are you okay? You haven't yelled Demon Wind in like a minute or two.
I got yelled at last time, so I'm trying not to invade.
I'm just checking.
You
I
get
got
yelled at all the time. That never stops you.
I'm just making sure you didn't like leave or something, and I had to vamp for you.
Demon Wind.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Well, as somebody that kind of bridges the gap, this is a question that I don't think you were prepped for, but I'm curious. Somebody that bridges the gap between kind of popular cinema and horror cinema, both independent and mainstream in nature. Like, what is your 10 cents on the idea of elevated horror? Like, what do you think about the Midsommers of the world and these movies that are bridging?
We don't say
I know you don't. I know
word
you don't
around.
like that word.
We don't say that phrase around here, Matt.
I was going to correct you. Technically, it's a phrase, not a word.
I don't. But there isn't really a better word to talk about sort of this mid-budget.
It's horror.
Art house.
You could just say horror.
But we as humans naturally like to categorize stuff. I'm trying to naturally categorize this.
I can understand why it's done, but I think it does a disservice to the horror genre as a whole. When you start separating, I mean, it's all horror, but there's good horror just like there's bad horror. And so horror that has layers to it, that has complex characters, that has a lot of layers and sub-themes, it doesn't mean it's not horror. It just means it's good horror. And I also think that a little bit of... I could be wrong here, and I might get blasted for this, but I feel like the rise of superhero movies and comic book movies becoming mainstream and then becoming so accepted into kind of our pop culture lexicon, and then them going out and kind of starting to get elevated with the text and things. You know, you have Logan, you have other movies too, where suddenly they're not just camp and bad acting and bad CGI. They're actually things we take seriously and we discuss as an actual medium. I feel like that maybe helped horror in a way realize, like, oh, you know, we can start doing that with horror too. Not that that didn't exist before, but now that Matt's shaking his head.
Oh no,
but but now it's you actually have an audience, a general audience that is primed to take these genres that previously were seen as something not to take seriously, and understand that you can actually I was going to use the word elevate, but you can actually you can take them seriously. They can have lots of layers and lots of depth and lots of meaning. So I don't know if that answers your question at all, but that was just me.
Well, let me jump in really quickly because I don't disagree with what you're saying. I mean, there is
that absolutely means, but
There's a but coming. No, my bigger issue here is number one. Okay, elevated horror itself doesn't piss me off in the sense that you're trying to classify something, because at least horror is still in the term. What pisses me off is a director then taking that term, elevated horror, and they're the ones turning it into like, oh, I'm not making a horror movie, I'm making an elevated horror movie. And I think more of the onus is on the people making films and trying to disassociate with horror itself than it is actual horror fans just trying to classify something as, I get it. When people think of horror, they think of slashers, they think of gross shit, they think of Scream, they think of Freddy. That's what they think of when they think of horror. So now they're given something different, like an It Follows or something of that nature, that starts this new subgenre because horror is always evolving. Horror never stays the same. It evolves with the times, and we are not now in this like art house rebellion portion of horror. But it's still horror. So fans can recognize that. Reviewers can recognize that. But it's when you get the people that don't recognize that and try to take the horror away from it because they're embarrassed by horror. That's what pisses me off. When you have a filmmaker that comes out and goes like, well, I didn't really make a horror movie. No, fuck yourself. Yes, you did. You made a horror movie. And don't try to disassociate yourself because you think you're better than horror.
Well, but here's the thing, though. Is it that they think they're better than horror, or is it that they realize, because you said fans know this, horror fans know it, general audiences don't. So that is also very much a very marketing friendly, general audience friendly line that says, oh, if you don't really like if you don't like a Donato movie, one of his Midnighters, then you might like this because this has complex characters or depth or whatever. So,
but that's existed in horror. I mean, like, that's been around. I
yes,
get that.
Yes,
I get that argument.
Arguing
but
as
that
a horror
is...
fan, you get that. I get that. Your average Joe Schmo sitting in, Kentucky with his 3 kids that doesn't really ever watch horror movies, he doesn't know that. So
how did we get on the topic of elevated horror on the Demon Wind episode? Like, how did that happen?
Because I felt like before we revel in some really, really stupid shit, we needed to have at least like a pretty smart. We have a smart guest. We should have a smart conversation and then get to the part where we talk about what Demon Wind is. So I wanted to like get a little bit of that on the table first.
I appreciate that you appreciate me as opposed to Donato just yelling Demon Wind in the background.
Demon Wind.
So normally this is the part of the podcast where I would talk about the plot of the movie, but I'm not doing that. Donato, it's all you.
How does one describe Demon Wind? That is the best way to lead into my, I guess, synopsis of what
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, Demon Wind?
Well, okay, we won't go there, but let's do this in the simplest terms possible. There's a character named Corey. He's going to visit the quote-unquote broken down old shack of his family past. And the opening scene is, I guess, his grandparents dabbled in black magic or something. There's oatmeal out of someone's mouth and a quote-unquote demon wind. Then it just cuts back to Corey. So this is present day. He's driving on these hilly countryside places. He encounters the crazy old gas station owner. And basically, he just wants to figure out what happened to his family. And I mean, that's his prime motivation. And he drags along numerous friends, some who show up an hour into the movie that you don't even know. There are some eggs broken open with worms in them. There's like deadite zombies. There's basically an Evil Dead riff somewhere in there. Then there's the big titty zombie, and I don't know. It's Demon Wind, man.
That was the worst.
That's pretty bad.
I don't know how do you describe any?
Like,
there's
what's
no
the point?
continuity.
Who's the guy? What is the thing? Like, give some, like, at least they don't really have a plot, but trick our audience into thinking that it does.
Fine. Do you want to redo it and actually try to like do a real plot
synopsis? No, I'm not recording or unrecording a single word of this. Just tell me who the major players are and why.
I don't know.
You don't know their names. Their names don't matter.
No,
sure.
there's
Okay.
Corey and Elaine, and
yeah, there's Corey and
the old
Elaine
guy and Harcourt.
Right, okay. So there's Corey and Elaine, who are the boyfriend-girlfriend. Corey is the main character who's going to figure out why he's been summoned to the cabin of his ancestors. That is it. You have friends like Dell. You have friends like Chuck, the magician karate guy.
Dell, who is a walking consent Me Too nightmare.
Yep. And this is the 90s,
Played
different times.
By Skinamax softcore star Bobby Johnston.
Numerous actors from Demon Wind went on to do softcore porn. So
that's about the level they could aspire to, so let's be honest.
At least we know something came of their careers.
That's true.
Oh, well, there is Steven Quadros, who plays Chuck, the karate magician, who is now an MMA commentator.
And then one woman went on to be a director. We saw that. Oh, and one's like stunts. Sure. Or no, one guy went out to be a director. One woman does stunts. That's about it. I don't know.
I don't know how you want me to describe that. These people go to this cabin to uncover some kind of mystery. And there are plot, like we can get into the plot devices, I guess we can call them, and get into more detail. But there really is no other thing besides the fact that there is a quote unquote demon wind that really isn't even used in the film.
The religion thing. You didn't even talk about the fact that there's a priest who has like an alternate form of Christianity.
We can get into that in more depth. I was giving the overall synopsis, Mr. Monagle.
Fine.
I have to interject at this point that there are so many characters for just a short horror movie. Like there is an egregious amount of his friends that show up, and
I think there's 8 total in the beginning, right? Counting those.
Yeah. And Matt was sitting on the couch talking, like, it's like, oh yeah, well that's Stacy. I was like, oh, Dell. I'm like, how do you know their names? Like he's talking about them like they're good friends of his.
Because I've watched this movie upwards of 8 times by this point.
But the way you talked about them, you're like, oh, Terry, oh, Dell. Like, I'm like, okay, you're talking about, oh, okay, I see. You're talking to the TV like they're your friends. You know all their names. Okay, that's
Number 1, I'd been drinking.
sad.
Number 2, I've seen this movie an unholy amount of times that no one should see.
You weren't drinking that much, let's be honest. And you were still talking to the TV like they were your buddies.
I know, because they are. They're all my friends.
Well,
Demon Wind is my friend.
Normally we would say, oh, how did our guest get to find this movie? But I think the more pressing question is, when did you come across Demon Wind, Donato?
So I found it when Mr. Jacob Hall on Slash Film basically pointed me in the direction of Demon Wind as it hit Shudder. And I'd seen Sam Zimmerman at Shudder tweeting about it, and I'm like, what the hell is this movie? And then Jacob Hall was basically like, Matt, you have to watch this movie, and I think you should write about it too, because your reaction is going to be pretty goddamn epic. And I said, okay, sure, that sounds fun. And I watched Demon Wind by myself in my apartment and cranked out like 2,000 words of just the most insane shit I've ever written in my life. But basically, I started the Church of Demon Wind at that point.
Yeah, and you'd been tweeting about it for literally months. And this is the thing. He forbade me from watching it because he talked about it so damn much that I was like, okay. I was like, guess what I'm going to watch? And I texted him. He's like, well, I was like, Demon. He's like, no, you're not allowed. I'm like, what? Why? You've been talking about this for ages. Like, why am I not allowed to watch it? He's like, because you have to watch it with people.
Yeah.
And with drinks.
I stand by the fact that Demon Wind is a party movie.
Basically, I was not allowed to watch it until I could watch it with him. So.
There was even one time where one of my friends started watching it by himself. And I was like, how far in are you? I'm going to queue up Shudder to exactly where you are so we can experience this together. And he had taken an edible. And it was quite the experience for him.
Well, that's when I went to watch it, was when it was on the last drive-in. And then you were like, no, you're not. And everybody's tweeting about it. And they were all like, oh my God, Demon Wind. I'm like, I wouldn't. Matt's like, this is so great. I'm like, I wouldn't know because you told me I wasn't allowed to watch it.
Yeah, can I just say that I made Demon Wind cool before Joe Bob Briggs and the last drive-in?
Yes,
I just want to say that.
Yes, you.
And that's also.
Yes, you're a hipster.
Yeah, I'm 100% a hipster. Yeah,
Brooklyn hipster.
Also, that was the only time I've ever tweeted about Demon Wind and actually gained followers and not lost them.
That's a pretty good spot to be in. Tell me about the Joe Bob Briggs thing, because you did, in my recollection, beat it, of course, but you only watched it like a couple of weeks before because it came on Shudder. So
wait, the Joe Bob, when it played on the last drive-in?
Yeah, I thought it was only like a month before you got around to it.
What? Absolutely not, sir. No, I watched it. I think it hit
I've
Shudder.
offended him.
I am offended because I tweet about this shit way too much.
Yeah, he really does.
No, but I think I wrote my article at least a year in advance when it hit the last drive-in, because it only played the last drive-in a few weeks ago at this point, on this date of June 22nd, whenever this episode airs. But so yeah, it only played a few weeks ago at this point, and I think my article backdates at least a year. So I've been thumping
Let's
Demon
find out,
Wind.
because you, of course, are like the very first article and pretty much the only. Yeah, yours is June 1st, 2018.
Yeah,
All
June
right.
1st. Yeah, so almost a year exactly.
Okay, fine. Let me rephrase that. Having discovered Demon Wind a year before it showed up on Joe Bob Briggs' show, like it isn't very often that you fall in love with a movie and then get such an immediate and overwhelming amount of validation for it. So, what was it like to see everybody jumping on this film that you've been trying to get them to watch for a while?
It was a very fun communal experience because I will admit that I'm not one for like live tweet-alongs. I'm not a tweet as you watch kind of person. I don't participate in those movie parties usually. I actually haven't even watched many of the Joe Bob's Briggs on Shutters either. So when immediately I got back from the gym and timing worked out perfectly where I looked at my phone and at least 5 or 6 people had immediately started texting and tweeting at me going like, Matt, Demon was about to hit the last drive-in. Like, are all your dreams coming true? So I had like work to do that night. I had to write an article, I think for Alisha even. And what I did instead, and what I did instead is I just immediately hopped in the shower, hopped back out, and I got on the Demon Wind last drive-in tweet chain, and it was just so much fun. I do have to admit, a film that's so personal to you and that you love so much and that you've kind of put out there for a while, and people go like, "What the hell is this movie?" Everyone jumped on the last drive-in bandwagon, and the validation of seeing everyone love it as much as you do. It was a great experience. It was so much fun.
Okay, so we've done the necessary background work. We kind of know where we're coming from with Demon Wind and why it was important to Donato. Alisha, I'm pivoting to you. You finally watched it.
Yes.
Lay it on me. What do you think?
It wasn't good. It wasn't well made. It was never not entertaining. I don't understand a goddamn thing about why anybody made any decision they did in that movie. And I told Matt that the amazing thing about it is that there's so many amazing things about it. 2 things that really stuck out to me. 1, every single person delivered every single line in the worst possible way. Like either with the like an inappropriate emotion or just with no emotion at all. And 2, the costuming in this movie felt like every single character was in a different movie and they were pulled from completely different movies and just thrown into this movie because the costuming made 0 sense and it was amazing. But I will say the creature effects and the practical effects, that was pretty cool. And also I had to laugh at the yellow blood to skirt the MPAA's no blood or no red blood thing, which was entertaining. But yeah, creature effects, practical effects, those were really cool. Every other decision in the movie, exceptionally baffling. But I will say I was always entertained. But part of that was probably because I was sitting next to Matt, who was like I said, talking along with it and like talking to them like they were his friends. So
Demon wins. So wait, okay. To Alicia's point of the fact that you never know what's going on, and I agree, you never do know what's going on, and that is the amazing thing of Demon Wind is how they strung this movie together of seeming scenes that don't tie into one another. They're just different horror movie tropes connected, and that's about it. But there are 2 things I want to say to that point that may have influenced. Number 1, it is confirmed that the cast and crew shot for 7 hours on the first day, and when they got to set the next day, all the dailies were just destroyed. They were bad. So they were forced to do 7 hours worth of work in 2 hours on the first day of shooting. So I don't know, maybe some of the continuity got lost in there. And there's the other reported fact that barring, I'm reading the IMDb page, but yeah, barring freezing temperatures, snow drifts, and gusting winds, all the sets kept getting knocked over, and they had to keep rebuilding things, and they had to keep redoing things on set just to keep the production from falling apart. So again, I think they lost a lot of time in filming. And I'm not saying the script was well done by any means, but I do wonder if that lost a little bit of what was intended for Demon Wind.
I'm almost positive they had those 7 hours back. It would not be much different than what we got today.
Give Charles Philip Moore, the writer-director, those 7 hours and see what he would have done with them.
Man, I don't...
Wait, okay, Nat, seriously, give me your take on the film. Because I saw your tweet immediately after. I know it was a joke tweet saying they never say demon wind. And number 1, fuck you. They say wind is the first line of dialogue in the movie. And you don't know a damn thing about subtlety then.
But there's literally never wind. It's just fog. They should have called it demon fog. because there's
That
never
honestly-
any wind.
That's
There's
correct.
always wind sounds, sort of, in the background.
Well,
There's
fog is wind
constant-
adjacent.
There's never not a moment that is silent in this movie, whether it's the score or weird sound effects, but there's never actually wind.
You mean how it opens on that weird church choir
It
sequence?
just goes on and on and oh my god.
You know.
Please stop.
Okay.
So to answer your question, so today, look, I'll put it this way. Today we recorded 2 episodes of Certified Forgotten, and the other one we talked about Sauna with Ashley Blackwell, which is a movie that I really like, very much my jam. This is a movie that's very much Donato's jam, and really, I don't know what order these episodes are going to air in necessarily, but to listen to these 2 episodes is to really understand the gamut of film tastes that are represented by your hosts. I love how many people have a history with the horror genre that ties to practical effects. You know, was not somebody that grew up reading Fangoria. They had them at my local supermarket, but the covers were too scary, so I never got them. But I know that like there's an entire generation of hardcore horror fans who, for them, their love of the genre is synonymous with the ability to do DIY special effects, to like get some syrup, go home, like play a little bit with like some silicone and some stuff, make some things in their basement, teach themselves how to make wounds, and do like all of these really cool low budget movies, all this like Super 8 stuff that had to do with gore and blood and pus and all of that. Like for a lot of fans, that's their love of the genre, is sort of that do-it-yourself aesthetic that comes with it. And I look at Demon Wind and I see a film that a lot of people will like for that reason, and I'm here for it. What I'm not as here for, and I've said this a couple of times, but let's put it once on the record for the Demon Wind podcast, I have never really been somebody who gravitates towards sort of like the splatter insanity. I don't want to say so bad it's good, but that kind of like the you're sometimes laughing at and sometimes laughing with type horror films, especially that we saw in the 80s. Those have just never really been my thing. I think the most I'll ever go with one of those is like your Evil Dead 2 or your Army of Darkness type stuff. And so, you know, it's not a bad movie. I get why people it is a bad movie, but it's not a movie that doesn't deserve the audience that it has, because the audience that it has is coming specifically for what it offers. But it's just so not my thing, man. I watched it and I was like, oh, I'm glad I watched it because now I don't have to watch it again.
It's not everyone's thing. I mean, that's first and foremost. Yes, if you're looking for an intellectual watch, if you're looking for something of substance, it's not Demon Wind.
This is a movie I would have watched with my college friends, like packed into somebody's like dorm room, just hanging out with, you know, like popcorn and like whatever, and just had a really dumb, like during finals week or something, we're all like slap happy and just need a break. Like this would have been that perfect movie. I have to laugh though, because you were talking about the practical effects and kind of the cheap DIY. It reminded me of when I was in college. I did take a few film classes, and our final project was we had to make our own film. So I partnered with my friend Angelo, and we made a film that was as bad as you can expect. It was a horror/thriller stalker film where he was obsessed with my character. It was very like pre-Me Too, very, very problematic in many ways. But we we had a scene where he trapped me in the kitchen and was throwing plates and dishes at me. We got a bunch of plates and dishes, just cheap ones from like the dollar store, and just broke them all over the kitchen. And another scene where we murdered our friend, also named Matt, and we used corn syrup colored with food coloring for the fake blood. And we forgot that when it dries, like he was basically so caked in, had so much all over his shirt that he really liked, that we had to cut him out of one of his favorite shirts and throw it away because it was just gore matted and with corn syrup and food coloring. But I will say it looked kind of awesome. It looked awesome on camera. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and to your credit, Matt, yes, I never thought you were actually going to like this movie. Let's just be straight up honest. We are completely different, and that's why we do this podcast. I am who you just described, the opposite. You described the person that loves, or that doesn't, isn't into this so bad it's good stuff. I'm all here for it. I'm all here for the practical effects. If you're able to wow me with your, you know what, because Demon Wind doesn't even wow me. I shouldn't even, this is hard to talk about because it is just so bad it's good. I love Demon Wind because it shouldn't make sense, and it doesn't. and it shouldn't exist. And somehow they have cobbled this movie together out of the most insane setups you can think of that continually makes me think that they just wrote scenes on the day of shooting. Because okay, Evil Dead influencers are everywhere, right?
Yeah.
We can put that out there. We can say, like, do you agree, Matt?
Oh yeah, like even the way that the quote unquote Deadites talk, like it's
Exactly.
lifted from Raimi's films.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're doing this whole Evil Dead thing the whole time, and you're in this world where, in one scene, they're in this cabin that I alluded to before so terribly, and the furniture starts flying around, like a knife flies across the screen.
His face is the best reaction to that scene, too.
Right. It's so Raimi-esque and all these things. And then all of a sudden, in the film's third act, there's this priest that comes out of nowhere as, like, Satan. And we're in this world of, like, possessions and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden, this giant beast comes out of nowhere. And, like, the third act, they're, like, fighting this giant monster. And then the main character turns into this, like, alien with, like, a bald head for no reason.
Yeah, he looked like a cross between... I literally looked over at Matt at one point to ask him a question and looked back at the screen and went, what the fuck just happened? What is wrong with him? Because I didn't see that change and they never explained it. And all of a sudden, the main character, who was a normal human, looked like a cross between Nosferatu and a Klingon. And I was just like, I don't understand why he turned into a Star Trek alien. What just happened?
Right. And I only say this to cement the fact that nothing in this movie matters to such a grand extent. And that's what I think transitions from so bad it's good to something that is just so entirely watchable because you're just baffled by what you're seeing on screen. Because I get there's so bad it's good. I get people watch The Room because in the same way, you're like, how did someone shoot this and think it's a good movie? Demon Wind to me is a step beyond so bad it's good because it is in this own world of filmmaking that just shouldn't exist. That is the best way I can put it.
It reads like a 16-year-old fan, like 16-year-old's like fanfic, like a kid going, oh, this would be awesome. We do this and we do this and we definitely have a demon with boobs and then there's just all this blood and then they do this and that's what it feels like. A 16-year-old kid just took every single horror trope they could think of because they watched Evil Dead way too many times and then they wanted to do like their own Evil Dead fanfic, but then they had a budget of like their parents getting like $20 and was like, here, go make a movie, and that's what happened.
Well, technically that budget was $500,000, but that's confirmed.
That's shocking to me.
That's
no, the budget was $500,000.
I feel like most of that had to have gone to the effects because I don't understand, and maybe the sets.
I mean, maybe that's what happens when you have to pay 8-actor scale as opposed to like 2.
Can we talk about also how none of the humans in this, like, nobody makes a good decision. Like they see a cross with they get to the homestead, the farmstead or whatever, despite being warned away multiple times by the creepy old guy. And the first thing they see is a cross with a skeleton hanging on it, and nobody seems to care. Also, and things that they should be upset about, but nobody cares, is the one character, Jessie, pink shirt girl. That's what I called her. Matt was like, that's Jessie. I was
isn't
like,
that Bonnie?
Bonnie, whatever.
It's Bonnie.
Okay, sorry to offend Matt's friend. Bonnie gets turned randomly. These like little demon girls show up out of nowhere, and one touches Bonnie and turns her into a baby doll, and then the baby doll disintegrates, and they're all just like, oh well, that just happened, and they keep like, I was like, that was your girlfriend, that was your friend. Nobody cared. Nobody cared at all.
The thing that Donato always, whenever he talks about my like 120 character review that I put on Twitter of Demon Wind, he always gives me shit about the part that I complain that Demon Wind isn't used in the title. But the most important part of that tweet, Matt, is hashtag justice for Bonnie. She does not get any love. Like they literally are like, oh, this, oh, my girlfriend's gone. Like, and it's not even a moment of trauma. It's just sort of like they go in the building and they forgot that she was around.
Yeah, she didn't exist
hurt
at that
me.
point.
That
And
just
then
doesn't
it's
exist.
double insult to injury, because then she comes back miraculously, but then she gets like fed on by the demon vampire thing. Then she dies and gets her life force sucked out of her in an even worse way. And I'm like, man, I don't even know Bonnie. She was just pink shirt girl to me, but that's like, they did her dirty.
Right, and just to point out the fact that nothing fucking matters in this movie, during Bonnie's death sequence, these 3 like pilgrim girls show up, obviously from the olden times when this atrocity happened in the beginning.
Was it the same demon girls that showed up in the start? Which death are we talking about? Baby doll
Bonnie.
death?
Baby doll Donnie.
Okay, baby doll death.
Baby doll Bonnie. Yeah. So these girls come out of nowhere, kill Bonnie, just tell everyone they're going to die and go away. And like, they never reappear again. We're playing with the paranormal here, and this is never a recurring theme. So again, Demon Wind just defines its own rules scene by scene, and then just throws the pages away, and then just keeps walking.
Speaking of people that you think are going to be very important and just never show up again, the little redheaded girl with the stick in the beginning doesn't show up. She like shows up in the beginning, and she's watching the cars and pointing at them. You're like, ooh, she's a witch, or she's cursing them, or she's something. I don't know. And she doesn't show up again until the very scene as she watches them drive away. But this time she's a weird aged demon, and you're just like, oh, well, that's nice. They brought her back at least. That kind of like, and that's how bad this movie is that she shows up in one scene. You think she's gonna be important. They literally never mention her again. She shows up in the last scene for no reason, again without context. And my reaction was, oh, okay, there's some continuity.
And I mean, if you want to talk about bad character development and bad character anything,
I don't think there even was development.
Exactly. So, alluding to the fact there's no character development, there are two characters, Willie and Raina, who are also friends of Corey, who are not present in the first hour's worth of the film.
Yeah, like
they are
first
not
two
there.
acts of the movie.
And after a few of the existing friends die off, as Alisha said before, Demon Wind just needs bodies to kill. So these two friends, Willie and Raina, just drive up to the cabin. They know exactly where to go. No, like, it's just amazing to me that they just show up at this cabin. They're like, hey guys, we're here. And they just walk into a massacre scenario. They live for what, 5 minutes?
Raina makes it for like 5 minutes because she gets eaten by that Satan skull thing.
The cattle skull hanging on a
and
bar.
then the
That
other
was all
guy,
right. I didn't mind
her
that death.
boyfriend,
Willie.
did he make it out of the...
No.
Oh, wait, no, that's
they
right.
leave Willie in the barn,
I was
and he
like,
gets
what happened to him? And then I was like, oh, he's decapitated. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you have a movie that will just introduce characters with no development about 45 to an hour in, kill them in 10 minutes, and just keep moving. It just doesn't care, and it's almost cavalier how much it doesn't care about what it's doing.
Yeah, let me jump on that because I think that it is an interesting point. You know, if you watch enough of these 80s and 90s slashers, the thing that the genre always gets criticized for, monster movies or whatever, you like, generally horror movies from the 80s and 90s that star teenagers. One of the things that, you know, the genre always gets shit on a little bit is like the archetypes, to the point where we've seen them played over and over again in meta films like Cabin in the Woods and Scream. Is like, oh, you know, there's the jock, there's the supportive girlfriend, there's like the sensitive lead, like all of these characters that are buckets and these archetypes that are so well defined that they don't ever step outside of them. And I think it is interesting because Demon Wind clearly wants to set up its group of characters initially to fall into those buckets. It has those archetypes in mind that, like, one character is sort of like the business prep friend, another is the douchebag jock. Like, everybody in that initial group is there to sort of fit one of those roles. And then the movie seemingly forgets why you have archetypes in horror films to begin with and just sort of lets everybody go in every different direction. It's weird that, like, the best you can say about their character development is they were almost cliched until they weren't anymore.
I want to say that Del very much keeps his cliche.
Del is the walking Me Too, nightmare.
Yeah, in the way that we meet Del as he walks into a diner and he sees Corey and Corey's girlfriend at the time. And Del immediately grabs the girlfriend and kisses her on the lips in front of everyone.
Like deep kiss,
Deep
not just
kiss
a peck.
as a joke. And then he looks at Corey, he's like, my man. And Corey doesn't give a shit.
In front of his own girlfriend.
Right, in front of his own girlfriend, too, yes.
That's
And
why I keep her
okay.
around.
I was just going to say.
That line twice
No, more
in
than
3
that.
minutes. No, he said it twice in the same scene.
Right, twice in the same scene, and he keeps saying, that's why I keep her around. Like, just the most possessive, oh my god. But he never breaks character. And the other, obviously, thing we can talk about character development is we need to get his name here. He is the karate magician.
Oh my god, I was just saying, can we bring up our Chuck?
Yes, Chuck.
Can we bring up my favorite part?
Chuck and Stacy, two
the beer
men.
cans and the doves.
Two men who appear. Their introduction is they're driving a convertible, and Chuck is sitting on, where the roof would come down. So you can see him sitting on the convertible in view of everyone, and he's dressed like a magician. And Stacy's driving, and he has a megaphone, and he's introducing Chuck as they come down.
Dressed like a wizard.
Dressed like a wizard.
Playing Ride of the Valkyries from Wagner.
That is also happening. And Chuck's first introduction is he jumps down. Del throws a beer can at him.
Because Chuck used to date Del's girlfriend, Terry?
Important context. So Del is not a fan of Chuck. And what Chuck does is he roundhouse kicks a beer can in the air at least 6 or 7 times.
He like hacky sacks it, but like high kicking hacky sack.
And the edit's beautiful because it's literally just goes back to Chuck doing the roundhouse, the can flipping in midair. It does that 5 times. And on the last one, Chuck roundhouse kicks it and just hits Del in the head. Oh,
and then he
perfection.
throws a dove. And then he pulls a dove out of nowhere. And wait, no. First there's a rabbit.
First there's a rabbit by Stacey.
First like Del goes to fight him because obviously this dick just jumped down and kicked a beer can in his face. Then Stacy, his wizard friend or whatever, is like, but wait, how can you, and like throws a smoke bomb, literally throws a smoke bomb, and then goes, but wait, don't hurt the rabbit. And then there's a rabbit on the ground because again, they're magicians. And then to get out of the scene, you can finish it.
I was going to say, we say all this again because then it's never acknowledged again that they are magicians.
But we do see a dove once more.
We see a dove, but that has nothing to do with Chuck and Stacy. So you've introduced Chuck and Stacy as the karate magicians of the group, the badasses, of course. And then they drive away towards the house and are seen throwing their magician costumes. And for the rest of the film, it's never a thing. They just never address the fact that they're magicians. And it's just like, why do you go to the extreme lengths to show this ridiculous character introduction and not have that be a running theme?
Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, the dove that he just randomly threw in the air to distract Del to get away, that dove was like the only thing in this movie that made it out alive.
Yeah. Is that true? Yeah, about that.
For the most part. Yeah.
I need you to dig it. I need you to find the script. Like you're going to spend enough time talking about it that somebody from the production will eventually be like, "Oh, I was in Demon Wind." I need you to find the script and do a full-on review of the script versus the movie.
Oh my god, I would love to do that. But also go ahead.
I was gonna say the demons also are like zombies because they give you demon rabies because Jack gets low rent Carrie Elwes, they give him it bites him when he's reaching through the window because he sees Bonnie, or he thinks he sees Bonnie, his girlfriend that he previously did not give a single solitary fuck about. She turned into a baby doll. Suddenly sees her like spirit or something through the window, calling the boarded up windows of the cabin, calling for him. And then he gets bit on the hand by a demon. And then in the next scene, apparently it's very quick moving demons rabies because like in the very next scene, he's like full on demon, like the gross oatmeal yogurt.
Yeah, they all just spit up this weird oatmeal tapioca pudding mixture. That's how you know you're a demon. You just start spitting this dessert mixture.
Also the weeping pustules and
the boils and things.
And the obligatory nature. 80s demon voice.
Demon.
That's
my obligatory 80s demon voice.
So I know that neither of you liked the new Child's Play, but I was thinking about this movie when I was watching it in that movie. I'm like, the same question came into my mind. Like, how do you explain this? Like, the very end of Child's Play, they sort of show the kids getting along after all this has happened. I was like, no. You're in therapy for life. You're probably in a juvenile center.
Yep.
So, like, how do the characters explain the fact? And, like, one friend, okay, you went into the woods, your friend died, whatever. But like you said, there's 8 people. How do you explain the deaths of all of these characters when you get back? Like, what do you even do?
Well, that's if they even remember the deaths. Like, no one remembered Bonnie dying. So, I mean, do they even remember what happened?
Well, then there's that weird dream sequence where it was like you thought it was over and he wakes up and then no, he's like in a dream within a dream. But then it was like a weird dream within a dream because his girlfriend started turning to demon and then he woke up and then everything was fine and back the way it normally was. Then they all turned into demons again and then he woke up again or something and then he looked at her and she was fine because she stabbed the Satan guy.
Right. So just to touch on the religious aspects
really
that Matt was getting mad about me not answering before because
I was very mad.
I know there's a religion, but it just doesn't matter. Again, this is the character storytelling not existing. Corey finds these scriptures, we'll call them, or, it's basically old journal diaries.
Yeah.
That say his grandma's like, okay.
Who's a witch.
Right. Grandma was a witch, blah, blah, blah. I left these daggers.
They also don't explain that.
2 of 7 daggers. So they make notice that there are 2 of 7 daggers left to protect against the demon wind's influence and these evilness. And every time, like, you can kill the demons with a dagger and they stay dead forever. But they just keep using these daggers and like leaving them random places. Like they'll stab a demon with it and just leave it in the demon and run away. And it's like, you probably need that to kill the rest of the demons. And then again, they just don't address it and the daggers are gone. And
it also does that weird like werewolf thing where you stab a person that's been turned into a demon with the dagger and then they revert to their human form and then then in an amazing like 80s, like early 90s special effects, they like disappear in a flash of light, which we finally learn in an offhanded comment is their soul, except for Jack, who like Benjamin Buttons himself backward and then turns into a bird, a dove, or a pigeon or something.
Again, no rules. There's no rules to this movie.
And then I was like, wait, was the flash of light his soul? Was the dove his soul? I don't understand. Like, what?
You don't understand Demon Wind. You just experience it.
I will say fun electrical effects are kind of fun, though.
So I was under the impression that the daggers were one-time use because I played enough video games to be like, oh, fuck, you should have saved that. It was like a one-time use item. And I thought that as soon as they stabbed one, the dagger disintegrated.
But there were 7 again, also, the reason, like, what happened to the 7, why there were 7, we don't know.
What happened to the other 5? 2. Yeah, like they only ever had 2.
But, like, there are, like, 50 demons. One of which is Lou Diamond Phillips. One of which is Lou Diamond Phillips, actually.
Right. Fun fact, Lou Diamond Phillips, was dating one of the assistant directors?
No, he was dating the second assistant director.
And they liked him so much, they're like, hey, do you want to be a zombie on set? And he just got in makeup, and one of the demon zombies that you see is actually Lou Diamond Phillips.
It's one of the shots where they're in the cabin boarded up, kind of making their final stand, and he looks through it's him and another zombie kind of looking through the boards. And you can tell it's him. Like, he's only in there for like 3 seconds, but you can tell it's him.
Yeah. They got A-list actors for this movie.
They didn't get A-list actors. They got a guy that happened to be on set because he was banging the second assistant director. And they were like, hey, you want to go into makeup for a couple hours? And he went, sure, okay. That's not getting an A-list talent.
It's as close as it gets for me.
I like Bats as much as the next man, but would you really describe Lou Diamond Phillips as an A-list actor?
I like Bats as much as the next man.
I will say, at that time, yes.
Oh, that's fair.
Back in the 80s and early 90s.
But no, this was 90. Okay, can we also say
90,
that?
But like between Young Guns,
True.
La Bamba, like at one point Lou Diamond Phillips was legit, like if not A-list, then like high B-list. Like he was known.
And this was 1990,
yes.
just to confirm for
this
everyone.
would have been in time, like he would have been a really well-known actor then.
Well, I more say it's a 1990 movie because it looks like one from literally 1980. The effects are so cheap, and it's like photorealism effects that...
And the costuming?
Yep, the costuming. But yes, I also do want to point out, we talked about the makeup before, and we all said that, the practical effects are pretty gruesome, and they do some fun stuff where they play with the yellow blood and whatnot. The effects artists did go on to actually have a pretty decent career. I say the Nutty Professor, but like it actually is recognized for its practical effects. So you have Nutty Professor, Men in Black, Cabin in the Woods, Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder's version. So these people did have, I think they're the ones that actually benefited the most from Demon Wind.
I mean, somebody must have, right?
Did anyone?
I think
I did. I think actually
on Earth, I think Matthew Donato is the person that has benefited most from Demon Wind.
I wouldn't argue that. I mean, I've built a brand around it, which I don't know why people actually listen to me. I don't understand.
So one thing, I kind of have to double back a little bit and talk a bit more about the So Bad It's Good thing. Like I found myself while I was watching it thinking a little bit about how my relationship to something like MST3K has changed. Okay. Because for a long time, like Mystery Science 30,000 was when I was young, like when I, from like 8 years old to like 16 years old or something, like that I love that. That was what introduced me to sort of these B-level movies. And, I would laugh so hard. I would like have to lay down, which has not really ever happened before or since. It was just something that I loved so much. And I think if I learned something from Demon Wind, and I want to give them credit for, growing me as a human being in some way, shape, or form, like it was just a thing that like I don't know if laughing at movies like this is really something that I enjoy as much as I used to. Like I don't seek out these movies and I'm like, oh, I'm like, it's funny and let's make fun of them. I don't know. Like I think I've gotten to a point in my career and in my relationship with film where like I would rather people genuinely like talk about the things that they love. So like your type of conversation, Matt, where you're talking about this movie and how much you like it, like I'm here for it. But if somebody was like, oh, it's so stupid, you should really enjoy it, like those kind of movies I feel kind of, I don't know, like I don't really have that vibe in me anymore because there's just so much out there I would rather somebody stick to their guns for one weird film like you, build a brand around weird stuff like I have with Black Coat's Daughter, and then make that stick. I don't think like the Joe Bob Briggs thing. Like I don't think I get that. I don't think that connects with me. Not to say that he doesn't treat those films respectfully, but kind of like that pile on mindset that some fans have. Those types of movies I don't think do it for me anymore.
Sorry, go ahead. I get what you're saying. I was telling Matt this, I think maybe a week or so ago. I said one of the reasons why I have grown away from horror a little bit is that I'm so character driven. And my brain tends to think in like epic stories, long form stories. I read, like The Stand and just long books when I was younger. So I have a hard time like revisiting horror movies outside of just kind of like it's on in the background or like it's dumb fun with friends every so often, because there's not enough substance in a lot of them for me to keep revisiting. There's nothing there. Like I don't really care about the characters generally because they're not generally well developed. So what I loved when I was a lot younger, I've grown away from now, and I still watch them, but I don't find as much in them as I did when I was younger.
I will say that I think with age comes the idea that we have less time on our hands. To what Alisha was saying before, Demon Wind feels like a movie she would watch in college with her friends and whatnot. And I feel like at that time, we had all the free time in the world. I mean, to simply put it, we're in college or we're in high school and we have all this weekend time. We have all this, what do we do after class? And we're just hanging out and stuff like that. Versus now, to find the time even to watch one movie a day before I go to bed is just near impossible. So I do talk to a lot of critics as they get later on in their ages. And
very,
we
very
use that.
careful
I think
how
you just
you
called
word
us
that.
old. I think you just called
I'm
us
just
old.
saying. Hey, I'm just saying. I talk to people
If
who
they're
are
almost dead like you and
In
Alisha, then
our advanced
Yeah.
doddering ages with our dementia that's slowly setting in.
I'm trying to make a point here. You guys are just undercutting me. Should I just yell Demon Wind again? Is that all
Sorry,
you think of
sorry,
me?
continue.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I'm just saying we have less time to spend on the things that don't matter versus what you guys were saying. There are so many good movies out there, and there are so many movies with artistic value and things that we can connect with and that we actually love on a level of appreciation and everything else besides so bad it's good. So I feel like more people have time for that these days. And younger, yes, we all did it when we were younger. We watched things because it was hilarious. As we get older, we're just like, yeah, I don't have as much time. So if I'm picking between Demon Wind and the next Oscar winner, it's like, I think I'm going to give the Oscar winner a play 9 times out of 10. But I'm different. Obviously, I'm going to pick Demon Wind
I was
every
like,
time.
will you though? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm talking for everyone. I'm
Yeah.
not talking for me. I am fucking insane.
But why will... I feel like maybe your entire career is just an attempt to recapture your youth.
Just got real deep. Just got really deep.
But if you think about it this way, putting a positive spin on this, a lot of these movies, I mean, if you look at like early Del Toro, early Raimi, or James Gunn, like all of this, so many profound and celebrated directors and filmmakers and writers now got their start in really bad, low budget,
Peter Jackson,
campy horror. And you're right, people aren't really watching those anymore. So if you think about it, you're like a future historian. You're an archivist of detailing the early years of filmmakers who we look at it and laugh now, but maybe eventually later on they'll go on to make Oscar-winning films, or
I'm still waiting for Charles Philip Moore's Lord of the
he's
Rings.
definitely not. That
No?
ship has sailed.
Okay.
But
but no, and I agree. And again, those are movies that these guys are making as younger filmmakers. I do think there is something that comes with age and something that comes with, obviously it goes out the window for like every single filmmaker. You have Carpenter, your Craven and stuff like that, the people who stay in horror because they love it. But I do generally think some people grow out of it. I think that's the case with a lot of moviegoers these days. You're into the more gross stuff and you're into the more ridiculous when you're younger and you quote unquote mature. I think that's
I will follow up on that too, because I like the point that Alisha was making. Like, there are a lot of horror films, think of like the video nasties and stuff, that just personally are not things that necessarily work for me, but I love it. I absolutely love it when somebody in an academic or even in a popular context like sits down and builds them into, like, contextualizes them as part of history. So, like, I'm not going to say probably, unless I am forced to by Matt Donato in person, I will never watch Demon Win again. But if somebody wanted to write a piece about the bridge between the VHS straight to video and the more like independent horror scenes of the 80s to 90s, and like wants to build that thesis sort of around Demon Win, like, I think that would be really interesting. Like, I think it would be really fascinating to talk about where horror existed sort of in this pseudo distributed space of late 80s and early 90s. And so that, to me, like, the archivist, the historian in me, really likes the idea of Demon Win. It's just not something that I want to sit down and watch again.
Also, in a small note, we're talking about history. I did look up Lou Diamond Phillips' filmography, and the same year was when Young Guns 2 came out, and then 88 was when La Bamba and the first Young Guns came out, or maybe La Bamba was 89. So, like, this would have been, yes, Matt Donato, let it be known for the record, henceforth, that he is correct in saying that at this time, Lou Diamond Phillips would have been an A-lister.
Which is almost more...
movie.
Wait, here's the funniest part of that. If you have a movie that no one knows about with all these actors you don't know about, why do you take the one A-list actor and cover him completely in makeup? Like, why don't you try to, like, sell him into a cameo role where you can at least say, like, and starring, like, and featuring Lou Diamond Phillips?
They shot this in 7 hours because I mean, they didn't shoot it much more than that, I don't think. Let's be honest. This wasn't like a weeks long shoot. They were like...
It was 24 days. This was a 24-day shoot.
Was it?
Yes, absolutely.
Really?
Yes. This was a 24-day shoot, which, again,
depressing.
plagued by weather and plagued by a
That's
first...
depressing.
Give Charles Phillip Moore some
I'm just
credit.
going to say, I'm pretty sure he just showed up and then his girlfriend was like, hey, we don't have the money to pay you because, well, I mean, you've seen the production, but do you want to put some makeup on? And
a fun fact, all the fog, it was real.
Oh, you mean because they should have just named it Demon Fog? Because that was the thing that annoyed me in this. And I pointed this out to Matt, we were watching it. There's never a moment, the sound effects are so weird because there's never not that weird synthesizer like sound in the background constantly. There's never a moment of silence. But then at pivotal moments when something happens, they just don't include a sound effect. So like when the skeleton falls off there's like the skeleton falls off the cross at one point, no sound effect.
There's straight up entire scenes where there's no ADR. They're trying to hold the door closed at one point with demons bashing against the door. So you have demons bashing against the door, and then Corey and his girlfriend like butting into it and trying to keep it closed, and there are no sound effects. Like I think they just gave up on putting sound into the movie.
They just but the synthesizer, that weird like synthesizer or the score is running underneath the entire thing. There is never a single moment of this movie that's just silent or that has, like Matt said, like no score but proper ADR. It was the weirdest. It was like the sound, it was all over the place. It was all over the place.
I think, okay, so here's what's happening. We're just going down this deep, dark Demon Wind rabbit hole, which you can do for hours. And we're already at 58 minutes, so here's what I'm going to say. I think at this point, we all have to say our 1 or 2 favorite Demon Wind moments, and then if it should be forgotten or resurrected from the grave. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Mr. Monagle, I want you to go first.
Okay. Favorite Demon Win moments, even though I'm a firm believer in #Justice for Bonnie, I do think that her turning into the child doll was probably the most visually appealing and most unsettling moment in the entire film. So I will give him that. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, I think I really appreciated the introduction of the magician and his sidekick. It was just such an out of left field moment in a movie that was already veering towards left field, that it kind of it worked for me. So those are the 2 scenes that pop up the most for me. As for whether or not this movie, which it was up until recently certified forgotten, deserves to remain that way, I'm going to stick by what I said a second ago. Like, I think that there is a context in which this is an important part of late 80s, early 90s horror history. And I think that in that regard, I hope it sticks around so people can dive a little bit more into the type of horror that was being produced, especially the type of horror that was being produced outside of Hollywood. Does the movie itself deserve to be remembered? Nah.
All right, I'll go next. I, too, have to celebrate the entrance of Chuck and his wizard sidekick Stacy, because the editing the choices made, the weirdness of it, just like truly just chef's kiss, because it was a magnificent entrance that was magnificent for all the wrong reasons, and then they just never explained it again. I probably have to say too, the creature effects for the great demon or the grand demon or whatever, those were pretty gnarly. Like, he was gross looking. Also, he clearly does not skip leg day because he was thick.
Beefy goat legs.
Yeah. So some of the I have to say, like, just like there was that one scene with the bare-breasted demon or hot demon or however she's credited.
It's literally Demon Hottie. I think it's like Demon Hottie.
Where it shows her like mangled, her feet are all like mangled and gnarled.
She's levitating and you see her mangled feet. Yeah.
So yeah, the practical effects and stuff are a lot of fun. It's like over the top, probably orange juice they use for the blood. I'm not sure, or like thinned down paint or something. As whether or not it should be forgotten, I can't help but think that kind of what I mentioned before, that every single filmmaker that loves movies starts out with a passion project, whether it's the student film or whatever, that is truly bad. But you can tell they love movies and they love the genre they're making it, and you can tell that the director loved horror movies. You can tell that he watched Evil Dead multiple times, probably, as a teenager or however old he was when he made this. So as a testament to just kind of as kind of a bottle, like a time capsule of showing that, like, this is a lot of first-time movies from directors that you now love looked an awful lot like this. Maybe not this bad, but they weren't great. So I will say that it deserves on its own merits, just as a tribute to the scrappy teen that just loved horror movies and wanted to make a kick-ass Evil Dead ripoff. I would say it deserves to be watched, also because of Chuck the Magician.
Fair. I don't even know why I'm answering this, because obviously what I love about the movie is just everything. It exists in its own world. I don't know how it exists. Specific call-outs, the barn scene where Raina gets killed by the cattle skull. There's a great effect.
That should have been my second. No, that
I was going to say quote unquote great effect, but the cattle skull is hanging on the wall. It unhinges. A giant tongue comes out of nowhere, wraps around her neck, drags her in, and then the cattle skull just crushes her head. So much fun in that effect. Chuck and Stacy fighting the demon zombies and the bare-tittied demon.
Oh wait, presto.
Yeah,
he never even got touched, but he was dead.
Stacy's just dead, and he says presto as he dies. Oh, it's so magnificent. Every little detail is so odd and so obscure, and it doesn't matter, and yet it makes this movie that should be celebrated for years and years to come. So obviously it should not be forgotten. It should be put on a pedestal with the greatest cinema has to offer.
That's why we keep him around.
I will say this. If I had seen this as part of like a 4-movie marathon and I'd been drinking all day, I might have very different feelings about it.
Well, if you drink all day, then it's always a 4-movie marathon.
Alisha, if people want to learn more, I am just segueing out of this. If people want to learn more about you and follow your writing, where do they seek you out online?
They can find me at adamtickets.com/movie-news, or they can find me yelling on Twitter about many, many things, usually mocking Donato. I do a lot of that, at Alisha Grauso.
Donato, just do it.
I do the thing now, Matt. Should I just prolong this and just make the suffering more inevitable?
Just let me leave. Just let me die, man.
You can find me, Matt Donato, on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at DonatoBomb. You can also find my writing on such sites as Adam Insider and Dread Central and Blade Disgusting /film, blah, 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 down the line. Just follow me on social media. I'll pimp my stuff out, and you can read it there.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Labsplice, LABSPLICE. That's probably the best way to go. I write for a variety of different places like everyone else I know, and you'll see them all there. You can also yell at me if you want for my intellectual inconsistency in loving radioactive dreams but hating demon wind. I contain multitudes. I am Legion. Please get off my back. Matt, Alisha, anything else you want to throw out there before we call this a day and never do it again?
Demon wind!
I'm done.
I'm finished.
I don't have anything else to add. That
I know this is
Matt screaming into the mic.
I know this said we recorded for an hour, but it felt like a year. It's the longest podcast episode of my life.
You aged. Would you say you aged like Bonnie when she came back from the dead the third time and the Demon King drained her like a vampire, but then also sucked her life force out of her?
I would say, as my final note, #Justice for
Justice
Bonnie.
for Bonnie.